Let's just sit in the panel already.
Are we good now?
We should be.
Okay, multi-gas popularly explored. Yep, everything looks good there.
All
All
right.
right, I've already shared it out to Gums and all of them, so.
Awesome.
And then I put the link up on a couple of my Facebook pages that I'm in, and sent a few through some Discords I'm in too. So.
All righty. Ought to be interesting then.
Here, let me send a full Discord. I hate the way it makes you share links on Discord. It's absolute garbage. Well, you have to put it in by the exact name of the thread in which, and then if that thread is the same in two or more different groups, you can't share anything. It has to be a unique thread name in a particular server that you're in.
That sounds,
It's terrible.
yeah. Hello, everyone. We're just getting the word out. We have a decently hefty topic for this evening.
I think it'll be a fun one.
I think so. All righty.
If Gooms would get over here, it'd be even more fun because then we could really get into the differences in American and Nordic freaking practices.
There we are.
Good, Realm?
Yep, I'm here.
All right.
Did you set your mods?
Yep.
AD,
Hey.
what's up?
There goes the damn neighborhood.
Hey.
Once we get Goons in here, we should be good. And then Christina, like bombardment.
Well, if we get the likes over 10K, it pushes it on the FYP even harder. So.
Yeah, that would be pretty cool.
Yep, if everyone be kind enough to tap the screen to help share this out so those who might want information or might be interested in these topics, they can join in and hear what's said. The more the merrier.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Like the heck out of it.
Yeah, spam the likes. Get this thing over 10K so it pushes it to the FYP, especially for those following North Talk and all that.
Yep.
As drama filled as that side of the web is. I swear, every time I wake up and freaking go scrolling through Norse Talk, I feel like I'm having an argument with one of my exes. It's that much drama.
Feels like a mild seizure, I'm not gonna lie.
Well, if you're going to have a seizure, make sure you hold your phone because that'll raise the likes up as you twitch on it.
Right?
There you go.
See, you can even be useful while having a seizure.
We're all about that.
JJ's here. Hello, JJ.
Hey, Einar.
Einar!
Hey there, Lo.
Appreciate your help, Einar.
We'll give it a few more minutes because we're waiting on
Gooms.
two other panelists.
Gooms and Christina, I did message him. I did message her. She'll be here shortly. And Gooms, I haven't heard back from, but I also shared it to him. So
He may have an alarm set or something because I believe where he's at, it's only 12:30 there.
yeah, Christina set an alarm too because she was having a nap.
Well, I know we had Gooms up pretty late last night because we were. He had a buddy of his pop into a live we were in that was wandering while drunk in the middle of the woods in Norway, trying to like he was at some party, decided to leave it and walk home, and had no idea where his cabin was, but chose a random direction and set off through the Norwegian wilderness.
Oh my goodness.
The left Stroud or what?
That's Norwegians for you.
Yeah, I never made it.
My, we're almost at 4K already.
Yep,
Keep it up, guys.
just hit
Yeah.
4K.
It's awesome.
Okay, so there.
Bill's Need Maker, hello.
Where is Goons?
JJ.
Hey Anna. Hey JJ. Putting mini humans to bed. You do you.
And 5K. Halfway there.
All right.
Yes.
All gifts are welcome because I will definitely put them into my buying more old freaking books fund.
See a couple of those videos that you've posted. You got some good ones.
Yeah, I've got a couple more coming. I've got some 1888s coming, and 1861, and 1895. I'm trying to build a whole collection of pre 1945.
Oh, I went down that rabbit hole of collecting like that in the UK, going to antique bookshops.
Mm-hmm.
Not
Well, I've got a couple of bookshops in the UK that I've got a good line with, and then there's like one set of bookshops that they're based out of Maryland called Wonder Book here in the US that they specialize in old books and stuff like that. They specialize in antiquities, so and the two of the ones that I deal with over in the UK, they specialize in Old Norse literature specifically. They have like a whole special like section, but there's a lot of those books that I just can't afford. Like they have one that I want that's like $14,000.
There is a person I know who is Scandinavian, and she's obviously native to the language, and she
Right.
gets some of the most amazing books and shares them. Problem is that translation, getting it translated into English, but she's had some of them done and has done PDFs on some really old, really like stuff that comes from local villages rather and from the local history and their local historical associations rather than being that widely published stuff.
Yeah, well, and that's what I'm focusing on now is the stuff that isn't widely published, which is why some of these books are so damn expensive.
Take a break there, Einar. Let some other people do it. Oh my. Thank you.
80s got quite the collection.
Let's see, there's one set that I want. Let me see if I can find the name of the freaking saga. It begins with an H, but it's never been translated into English because it's not possible to translate it into English because English does not have the words to convert about 60% of the saga.
That's a thing. That happens all the time where you find really renowned authors who do translations and people who've done other translations that are well known to us.
So I've got
And it don't work.
Dr. Arthur Broder here. He said, I regret exceedingly that the highly technical nature of Hatatal forbids translation into English. There are, to be sure, more or less, usually less, accurate translations into Scandinavian and even into Latin. Even in the excellent Armaganian edition, many of the glosses are purely conjectural, as any attempt to convey this into English, which is a vocabulary which has no equivalent in our language, will.
No, it's a thing.
Mm-hmm.
Kathleen, we're doing a live panel, and we're just waiting on two others to show up. I hope I hope I'm not offending you.
Yep, we have hit 10K.
Thank you. Well done, y'all.
I do hope you stick around, and I do hope you share some of your knowledge in the comments.
Who's that?
Kathleen.
Oh,
So offended.
Well, I don't know where Gooms is. Eventually, I think he'll pop in. Eventually, I think Christina will too, because I know, like I said, she had that alarm set for her brief nap. But we are only 3 minutes past the actual start, so there's that.
Yeah, what do you think? 5? Is 5 minutes a fair wait time?
yeah, and if we just have to go and they pop in later, that's fine.
Okay.
Yeah, I want to give a rundown of the rules for tonight and what's it about and how the boxes are working and why.
Sure. So, welcome everybody. I am super stoked that you're here, especially since I heard that my video that I posted today was being suppressed, which is odd. But this is a live Q&A panel. Everybody you see over here was asked to join the panel along with two others we're still waiting for. What is going to happen is we're going to ask one main question with a couple of offshoot questions, and we're going to go through the panel, and that's how it's going to be answered. Thank you, Anna.
Ooh, that's nice. I like that one.
And I know, it's pretty cool.
Thank you.
And as we go through these questions, everyone is more than welcome to put their opinions and knowledge in the comments. But this is designed for the wider and greater community, so that if somebody wants to learn something, or maybe there's a variance of opinions there, we welcome that as long as it's respectful. Everyone will be respectful, or we will have to remove people. I don't want to do that. I have not had to do that for some time. But everyone knows how these have worked, and for the most part, from the ones that I have seen, they have all gone very well. Everyone's been respectful. There's been a whole lot of information passed back and forth, despite differences and despite disagreement. So I hope we can continue that here this evening.
And the topic for the evening?
So the main question for this evening is, what are the similarities in Norse pagan practices by those from Nordic countries and those in the U.S.? The offshoot of that, which I want everybody to answer that first, and then we can go into where do Germanic Norse practices / heathenry and animism fit into that equation? Because obviously we know there's more pagan than just Norse pagan. So it's a bit of a opening the floor to see some more of these similarities. We tend to focus and points of contention between this group and that group or whatever, but I think as you move down any particular path and you start grabbing some of that knowledge that's out there, you start to see a lot of the similarities as opposed to just the differences. And there are a lot of similarities. There are some differences, but the differences don't need to separate us. It's more of a you do you, and if that works for you, that works for you kind of thing.
Yeah, a lot of the Scandinavians kind of, over the years, due to some stuff that America did, they have kind of shunned us off into a corner because the whole AFA thing in 1972 and what happened with all of that. So they kind of did a whole cutoff thing there, and they kind of kicked us to the curb. But I think in the intervening like 50 plus years since then, we've come a long way towards getting back to the roots of what it was versus what they remember we turned it into.
Right. And some of the things that have transpired, I can't say that I blame them, but to paint everyone with that brush is irresponsible in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, Christina.
We lost AD, and I'm not sure why.
It could be from a phone call. It happens to her all the time.
Yeah, AD's popular.
Yeah.
Nans, you're not right. Sorry, not right. Sorry, you're not wrong. Damn. The words are having trouble wording tonight. You are not wrong. You know what I meant.
You're all right, Christina. I will ask that all panelists. Oh, we lost Christina too. Jeez.
Weird.
I will ask panelists when they come in if they're not. Hey, Heathen Vet. When the panelists come in, if they could please mute so that everyone has the ability to answer unabated.
Yep. She's back. Christina's back.
Hi, everybody. I will mute myself.
Hey.
How are you? All right,
We're
Looney.
having some internet issues here, so I apologize.
It's all good. Looney, I think we're going to go ahead and get started. Hopefully Gums shows up. Hopefully we get AD back. If it's all right, Looney, I would like to start with you. So what are the similarities in Norse pagan practices by those from Nordic countries and those in the U.S.?
Well, one thing that you will notice is while America has a whole lot of the WSBS hiding amongst it that we try to weed out, you will find a corresponding amount of Scandinavian elitists, that, well, I'm from Scandinavia, so I know more. So you find that ego on both sides, and both sides work to weed that out. You also will find that thanks to the way that Scandinavians migrated to the U.S. and they largely settled in the East and then in the Midwest, they brought a lot of those folk traditions with them, like the Pennsylvania Dutch, and then you had a lot of the Swedes that went to the Midwest. Most of your Germanic tribe styles went down to the Southwest and stuff. And in bringing those with them, uh, and the destigmatization of it in America, those practices becoming more open and stuff. Those true practices from there have started to come forward and be practiced even more. Thanks to the digital age, we have also been able to start researching and retying those roots back to people in Norway, Sweden, and stuff like that, and start seeing things like the fire festival and stuff and how all that gets done, and be able to start practicing correctly. You do still get those people that think, oh, I don't need to do it the way that they did and this and that. But by and large, we're starting to see, at least in the last 20 years, a real cohesion of practicing styles, whether either side wants to admit it or not.
Okay. Outstanding. Christina, are you able to jump in?
Can you hear me?
Yes. Similarities in Norse pagan practices by those from Nordic countries and those in the U.S.
Oh boy. Gosh, I mean, this is really difficult for me because I practice mostly Teutonic, Germanic Teutonic paganism. And I do know a lot of people in Scandinavia who practice Scandinavian traditions. The little bit I do know is that from Finland, with the Sami culture, the practice of folklore is still alive and well in a lot of Seith groups here in America. And Vardlokur are spell songs that people who work mostly with ancestors, they develop very specific songs that either are passed down through their family lineage or they get them from dreams or from visions where they work with their ancestors. So that, I would say, is probably the most common. Unfortunately, I've dealt with a lot of the Scandinavian elitism. Being an American Scythe practitioner, I've had a little bit from Scandinavia kind of poo-poo my practices because I'm mostly Teutonic and Germanic, and I work with mostly with my German ancestors. So I guess maybe there's a little bit of a difficulty there in answering the question, but I hope that helps.
It does, and we're going to actually dip into your the way you practice here shortly.
Oh, okay.
Realm. Same question to you. What are the similarities in Norse pagan practices by those from Nordic countries and those in the U.S.?
So I've had the pleasure of being able to practice both in the U.S. and in the United Kingdom for the 26 plus years that I lived and practiced there. And those that I practiced with in the UK came from other Scandinavian countries, not just the United Kingdom, which was really interesting to see the way they practice and view things versus when I came back after 26 plus years to the United States, where I started and had that foundation, and how it evolved and changed in the US since I've been gone, and the ways that it has slowly becoming more in line with that European and Nordic country viewpoint of those practices that they do. There's a lot still to be done, and there is a lot of times I find an unhealthy and unhelpful amount of very difficult nationalistic viewpoint that comes from people from some of the Nordic countries. And I'm not crapping on Scandinavians. People don't think that I am, but that's mainly where I've seen it from. And I've done videos to address that. When they talk about an unbroken chain, which does not exist. That's a fairy tale. Because we know through modern DNA, archaeological DNA, and ancient DNA, and we've come so far in that, that has been done in the Scandinavian countries as well as those in the United States, to see the percentages in the migration where that heritage for that quote unbroken quote line is that some people say, it doesn't exist. You can find an American who is a higher percentage of Nordic or Scandinavian, someone who's actually born in Scandinavia at this time. That's a very true scientific thing. And I find it very interesting that now we're moving past that DNA being a prerequisite or a requirement to think that we can do a thing or practice a thing. For me, that's been a wonderful thing to see develop. And we're seeing American practice go past that 1970s, 1972 a sought-through view that was the old AFA at the time, moving into, okay, how do we get in touch with those villages, the documents, the books, like the practices of the people in the native countries, with a respect to them so that we can learn from them, and that we have something also under our modern worldview that we can offer as well, which I think is pretty nice to see that share of it. But the main thing I think that is, and again, Kennings, the influence that they have, that comes back to the U.S., the more we understand them, the more we start to understand, and I'm going to use something spiritual, the frequency, energy, vibration, the mindset and flow of those people who are those practitioners in the countries, because the Kennings aren't native to the U.S. But we have huge communities here, like I'm going to use Solvang in California, massive Scandinavian community there, where they are, their grandparents or their parents come from Scandinavia, but they are absolutely born in the United States, raised in the United States, and have that upbringing and mindset, but yet they're keeping those older family traditions, keeping that oral tradition alive, keeping the practices alive. So I think what we have mostly in common is the desire to keep the old in the forefront, to connect in a deeper and more important way for us. And we often get hung up on some of the small differences or even the large differences in details about it. But in the end, the goal all around is to have that special connection, to have that spiritual experience, to be able to, whether you say, venerate or honor, whatever it is term you choose to use, the deities in the Norse pantheon, and I'm going to say from animistic point of view also, and I know you're going to get that later, the unseen and the seen population, nature in itself. And I think we're going back to that, and we lose touch with that under our modern worldview. And we're also all influenced, regardless of the country, by politics, by the current political correctness, social norms, influence in schools and universities and the workplace that may come from others and pressures, peer pressures, or societal pressures, or even politics or Abrahamic pressures that come from that, and influences from advertising to TV. But I think the main commonality is that desire to have a meaningful relationship with, and practice with, and respect and veneration with, communication with the old gods.
Outstanding. Thank you. I think, and I'm going to kind of weigh in just a little bit. I'm not going to spend too much time on it because this is for y'all and for the community. But one of the things I would like to say is, with the simple fact that certain individuals, that just because they live in the United States, they're following a familial tradition. They have been taught through their family line. So there are people in the U.S. that do practice very similarly. I mean, because some things are different from family line to family line because there's different family traditions and things like that. But some of those practices are absolutely taken from those Nordic countries and passed through the family line. So there are, and Canada, yes, there are legitimate practitioners on both ends of that. And because it is to those individuals that are now carrying that torch for that family to teach their children, and things like that. And I think there is more of that going on than anyone cares to admit or cares to shed a light on, is that family, those family lines. And I'm not getting into the whole DNA thing because I think that's used as a point of contention more often than not. But the family traditions are very similar, especially when you go from living in Scandinavia to whatever year it was that, whether it be U.S., Canada, or whatever, those traditions were brought with you, much like when individuals migrated into Scandinavia to begin with. So I think that is one of the huge similarities that exists between Nordic countries and here in the Western United States and Canada and alike. So off of that, and Looney, I'm going to ask you to go first. Where do Germanic Norse practices and animism fit into that whole equation?
Well, one thing that people have to understand is that a large bulk of the Scandinavian processes came out of Germanic heathenry. We know that from tracing back, like Odin to Wodenaz, Thor back to Thunor, etc., etc. The language that they built off of, coming from the Proto-Germanic into the Old Norse and into the Old West Norse, Old East Norse, and all of that. So even the language carried up. The stories changed, but the stories changed because of the locations that they were in. Certain gods became more prominent based on where you were at. You know, like Ran and Njord, stuff like that around fishing became more important, so on and so forth. And Germanic heathenry keeps a lot of those same practices because of where Germany happens to be located. But when we think of Germanic practices, we have to remember that Germanic practice doesn't mean Germany as a whole. It means Greater Germania, which where those tribes come out of stretches all the way from Scandinavia clear down into the southern part of northern Italy. It's a huge swath of area. Those tribes during the migration period, you didn't just leave your tradition behind, pick up and move and go, okay, we're going to start something completely new. You took what was familiar and you adapted it to where you. And so there is a lot of enriching that can come in Scandinavian heathenry from looking at the Germanic heathenry. Just like, here in America, there is a lot of tradition that can be found, like, say, like I mentioned earlier, in Minnesota. There are certain practices that they do there that I feel if people studied those would help enrich them. If you study, what people in Scandinavia are doing now, be it, well, we'll skip Sweden because Sweden's just a shopping mall. But if we look at like Denmark, Norway, Iceland, stuff like that, there are practices and festivals that they do that are like on the scale of like New Orleans, but they're so enriching. You get bands out of there like Heilung and stuff like that that bring that to people. The main thing you got to do is just get out there and practice, get out there and meet new people, become well traveled. Don't be afraid to open your mind and see what they're doing and see if some of that resonates with you. I'm not saying, take and completely adapt another religion into your own stuff and become eclectic. I'm not saying that at all. I don't like eclectics, but that's a whole nother topic. But I'm saying open your mind and don't be afraid to get out of your comfort zone a bit and learn some new stuff either.
Christina, how do Germanic Norse practices / heathenry and animism fit into that equation?
As somebody who comes from a strong Germanic family, what I can say is that it does not translate well into American heathenry. A big part of German history is community. It's also sharing of stories, traveling, wandering, having long hauls and places kind of like pubs where people would gather and they would tell their stories. In Germany, there is a respect for a storyteller. There's a respect, and it doesn't matter whether the storyteller is a woman or a man. If somebody wants to tell you some dream they had or some spiritual experience, there is a respect and an acceptance. And in America, especially in American heathenry, they label it something called UPG, unverified personal gnosis. And honestly, I think that word is kind of like a pigeonhole. It's unverified, so it's unvalid. It's not, it's just your little kooky craziness. And there is not, the Germanic people were incredibly poetic. They felt things. They were expressive, and then unfortunately, due to Catholicism, due to all the wars, a lot of that was shut down. But we see so much of that beauty in the Germanic diaspora here in America. A lot of German families have kept that passion and we see that, in Oktoberfest, in all the different harvest festivals. There is loving the land, loving the family, and having connection to storytelling and poetry. But unfortunately, I think that American heathenry wants so much to be legitimate, they have denied their heart. They've denied the passion and the power of human connection with vulnerability and authenticity. And there's nothing wrong with going into history and recreating these things. But I do feel like in American Heathenry, we spend way too much time saying this is how it should be done, and having wonderful, beautiful conversations with each other. So,
Thank you very much. Realm, you're up.
Yeah, I'm going to say, Looney and Christina hit on a lot of what I was thinking, so I'm going to move past that because, yeah, everything valid and totally agree. And I'm going to enforce something that Looney said, that Norse paganism is a branch of Germanic religion that developed during the Proto-Norse period. And it did cover that wide swathe of land and that Germania covered during the era. And many people modernly isolate it based on the modern borders and country lines to say that's Germany. That's not the case. And they push it aside, sort of to the left. It's like that, relative, that aunt or uncle that you don't want to invite to Yule or bring to a family gathering because, they're a bit different and embarrassing. But the fact is there that was that huge area that it covered. It's massive. The migration area. It did migrate from Germania and into all of the Nordic countries, but yet for some reason it seems to get pushed to the side, and I'm not entirely sure why it gets done that way, because those lines of countries and borders as we see them now did not exist. Not even the Nordic countries. Germany didn't exist formally during that period. Those lines weren't drawn. People were very fluid. They moved, as Looney very well stated, and migrated based upon, okay, their beliefs were based upon, am I needing this deity or these spirits of the land or of the water because I'm coastal, or because I'm I'm sitting in the middle of the country, or because I'm in the mountainous areas. And it varied. Those practices varied from tribe to tribe, from nodal point to nodal point. But we tend to box things in modernly to say it must fit this parameter. It's got to be A or B. It must be this or that. We modernly definition on there. When those lines were nowhere near drawn like that, it was far more fluid and broad during especially the Bronze Age and even before. It was much more broad. There was no, clear cut lines. We said it has to be practiced this way. It must be done that way. So I think people miss out by not looking into their Germanic side. We hear a ton about Icelandic sagas. We hear a ton about Scandinavian and Norwegian, Icelandic, but we don't give a huge nod to the Germanic. But there is a lot out there if you choose to look for it and for those tribes. And yes, they did come from a very beautiful background before that point even, and looking where that comes from. Now, some people will say that doesn't matter to me. I'm not interested in what was. I'm interested in what I do now and what is now. That's a prerogative. That's someone's own path of their way. But there are those who want to look at that and go, hey, where did this come from? Not everybody takes something on just blind faith. A lot of people came out of Abrahamic paths where they were told, oh, you must just believe, or I'm going to tell you this is how it is. And they're looking for something a bit deeper. They want to know the who, what, when, where, and why. Where did this come from? Where did it originate from? How far back does it go? What were the influences? To make it add to their own personal beliefs and faiths. And there's nothing wrong with either way. And I think animism also gets pushed to the side in the same way that Germanic paganism, Norse paganism, gets pushed to the side. And if we look even at our, we find more anthropomorphic artifacts found in archaeology than we do those directed to deities on the Norse pantheon. Because why? Because the people had a connection to the land and the spirits thereof, where they were, whether that be, seaside, oceanside, whether that be in the middle of the land, whether that be in the mountainous areas, and when they migrated. They had a connection to those very closely. And those anthropomorphic artifacts are vast, but not a lot of people look for them. They look for, oh, is there a brooch, a bracelet, a runestone that mentions Odin or that mentions Thor or Frigg or Freya, but they don't look back at the animistic parts that come from that anthropomorphic artifact that is out there. And there's far more of them, far more, like vastly more, than there are of those that depict either a man of Odin or Odin or any other deity on the Norse path. And again, I think, at least from my practice and point of view, it would be a disservice if I did not look at those and how things came to be. That's just the way my mind works. Aside from my own living spirituality and my own faith in my own practice, that knowledge and looking and searching and understanding is super important to me. And again, it's not for everybody. Not everybody wishes to do that. Just like not everybody who is of an Abrahamic path wants to do any research or dig further or look at previous versions or historical information or even migration. And they're good with that. They're happy. They're intact. They're whole. It's their thing. There's nothing wrong with that. Everybody's going to look at it from their own point of view. But a lot of people will say, oh, yeah, realm practice is Scandinavian. No, I don't. No, I don't. I don't. It's Germanic. It's Germanic and it's animism. And I do find the same as Christina does, because I practice Sade, we do get shunned and pushed aside a lot for that fact. If we go down that, if that is our path and that is what we work with. And that's not just a family thing. My grandmother who taught me, her family, Uppsala, that's stomping ground. But if you look at my biological father and my grandfather, all of that is Germanic. So I made the choice after being given all of the information, being taught all that I needed to be taught by my grandmother, and then going under apprenticeships to think, okay, let me look into this because I want to know more. I want to know more. Before people gave names to deities, when they first stepped out of those caves, when they looked up at the sky and wondered, where did it first start?
Yeah. Thank you very much. I'm going to, as far as similarities between Norse pagan practices from Nordic countries and U.S. similarities, I think you'd be hard pressed to find someone who doesn't at some point have some form of ancestors that either fought with or against the Roman or Byzantine Empire. So I guess that's something that we share. And, where you have Germanic Norse practices, heathenry, and animism, how that fits into I'm going to let the panelists answer that question, Deadly Venom, in just 1 second. Everybody read Deadly Venom's comment. I'm going to let them answer that for you. That's a very good question. Thank you for asking it. So the animist portion, at least for me, I don't know if anybody's ever heard of Ben Bacon, but he's a furniture specialist, whatever that means. And he started looking at all these different cave drawings and stuff like that. And he's now got a couple of, I don't know how to pin her question. I can translate it, mute, block, report, or reply. It won't let me. I don't know. Redline, are you still in here? Are you able to pin it?
It won't let me as a mod either.
Okay. I'll tell you what. I can scroll back up and then I can ask it. Okay, you can't pin it either. Fair enough. But all these cave drawings and stuff like that, uh, as far as going back about 40,000 years, uh, some of these cave drawings and how they were utilizing the lunar cycle in order to predict animal births or animal counts, or so they could follow that migration of those herds and use it for food, things like that. So all of these things, if you follow that forward in time, there are so many similarities as far as petroglyphs are concerned, as well as practices and things venerated into that mix. It's absolutely astounding to see some of the similarities, and where a certain practice comes from. So I think heathenry does fit into that equation very well, or sorry, animism. However, I do agree with everybody that Germanic practices or heathenry does not translate well, especially with the post 1938 view on things, and the particular problems that exist within certain communities, with the WS and everything like that. We also have those same problems where certain sects or branches of that are embedded in, let's say, prison system and things like that, because those are the people that are the loudest usually, and that is what is presented more often than not as an example of a US practitioner, when that's not the case. But they do exist, and it is very difficult. So, all right. Norse Jedi, can you throw that question back out there for me? Got it copied. Did you only copy ask? I'll scroll up. What advice would you give someone who doesn't know their family ancestry? Looney, we're going to follow the same order, if that's okay with you.
Well, the first answer I'm going to give might offend some people, but whatever. And that is, it doesn't fucking matter. The second part of that answer, however, that I'll give is, if you really want to know your ancestry and stuff, I mean, yeah, you could do DNA testing and stuff, and usually, like, Ancestry DNA has sales for like $75 or something to get one done. But really, all I want to tell you is what your genetic makeup is and from what periods that genetic makeup got there. There are people in Scandinavia right now, for an example, that have tons of Scandinavian DNA and know fuck all about the practice and haven't for 30 or 40 generations, because Christianity got there and they converted to that and stuck with that the whole way through. So really, your genetic makeup doesn't fucking matter. Like, if you really want to practice heathenry, fucking do it. Have at it. Like,
Looney? I know the first part didn't offend me. Christina. And also, Redline, thank you for putting that comment in there. I do appreciate it.
What is the comment? Okay, cool.
It was, no, not the
Oh, okay.
It was, what advice would you give someone who doesn't know their family ancestry?
Okay. So there's a practice that I've been doing for probably 30 years, and I do it because my grandmother, when she passed, came into my dreams and taught me. And this is actually a big thing in my family. Like, a lot of my family members talk to dead people. It's just a big part of the family line. And so my grandmother had taught me this, but I often try to cross-reference what I learn from my dreams and ancestry. I try to cross-reference and I try to find it, and I found it in several fairy tales, as well as in trolldom in Sweden. So this is a thing people used to practice. So about once a year, a woman would, or a Scythe woman, would go out her door and walk to a cemetery with the intent of talking to the ancestors, and then walk back. But there's some key elements to that. Number one, you're not supposed to talk to anybody else. No listening to the phone. No, you have to like, this is your intent and your purpose. You walk out your door with your intent to meet your ancestors. Anything you see on the way is an omen. You just take note. You do not interact. You don't say anything. You get to the cemetery, you can give offerings of water, mead, whatever, and say thank you. And then you turn and you walk back, speaking to no one until you get into your front door. And I've done this several times, and invariably within either that night or within the next couple nights, I will have a dream of one of my ancestors. And it always works. And I've taught this to many people. And I think one of the reasons why, thinking about in neurolinguistics, when we do an action where we basically show our subconscious, we literally make a sacrifice. We're not talking to somebody. We're physically walking as a ritual, as a symbol. I am going out into the underworld and coming back with the intent of hearing whatever the ancestors want to tell me. And when we put actions to words, the subconscious believes us. So many of us, we create ritual, but we have words, but no actions to actually back that up. And I have found that the Hell Walk is one of the most beautiful, powerful rituals to really tell the subconscious, yes, I want to hear from my ancestors. I'm really time. And I really want to take this time, and I'm going to make the sacrifices necessary to listen to whatever they have to say.
Outstanding. Thank you, Christina. Realm.
Yeah, I'm going to 110% back up what Looney just said. Does not fucking matter. Do not care. Do not care. Does not matter. It is your path. It is your connection to your own spiritual belief system. Somebody may choose to be Buddhist. No Buddhists in their family. Don't know their ancestral line. You may choose to go down the Abrahamic path. You may go down Celtic. You may go down Norse paganism. Doesn't mean you have to have a bloodline you're aware of. That becomes very sketch when people say it depends on your bloodline. That's very exclusionary and isolationist and very closed-minded. Some people may know their ancestry, others may not. Some people may be adopted and don't know that yet. Shit, I waited until I didn't find out till just a couple of years ago my birth father's true ancestry, because his mother didn't want it known. I did not know. I thought we came from, my birth father's line was something very different because she gave a whole different story, his mother. And then when I connected with him again, after all these years, and discovered the truth through his cousins and his stepbrother, the truth of the matter, he was like, no shit. Did it change my practice? No. Did it alter it in some way that made me think, oh, no. Yes, it was Germanic. Yes, his father and grandmother and grandfather were born in Germany. They practiced Norse paganism, and then they immigrated to the U.S. Their birth certificates are in German. But had I even never known that, would have made zero difference to the path that I decided to take based on the way that I was taught and brought up by my other grandmother that came from my maternal line. If I didn't know any of them, it wouldn't matter to me. I don't think it matters for anyone else. You know what your soul's desire is, what your true self is seeking and looking for. There is not a single human being on the planet Earth that can tell you the will of the gods. None. We are not them. We are human beings. And for others to judge someone based on that is, to me, abhorrent. And that's a me thing. But again, you could be totally adopted and have no clue. Is it important you know your ancestral line? Nope. Is it important that you do your DNA? Cool if you want to do it. Good for you. No hate, no shame in that. But absolutely not a requirement at all.
Thank you. Right before I let Rooney do an add-on. Oh, you're mute, Ron.
I'm trying.
All right. So if anybody has a question, put it in the comments and we'll throw it at the panel just to see all of that. Looney, go ahead and do your add-on.
So to add on to what Christina had said, and to show kind of a difference in the practices, Christina had mentioned, the Teutonic or Germanic practice of walking out to the graveyard and then walking back, taking the notes, this and that, and then having the dream later. Well, in the Norse practices, there is actually there's a couple of sagas. Let's see, Njal Saga, Erbigi Saga, Gisli Saga, and Hatalatal, which all document a practice that was solely for women, where the women of the could go out and sit on a mound and get messages directly from the ancestors of the mound that they were sitting in. This was not viewed as being a magical practice at all. This was simply something that women were inherently able to do. And I think it's an interesting contrast to, the Germanic practice of also walking out directly to the dead and speaking with them.
Outstanding. All right, I believe this was Anna's question. I am also going to throw this at the panel. And I'm going to go first. Why is a eclectic viewed as bad?
Oh, pardon my language. No fucking clue. Because if you go back to the people of the time, again, I'm going to go back to what Looney mentioned earlier, at that wide swathe of land where those peoples came from, where they migrated from and to. They brought those traditions with them, some of which they integrated in those nodal points, those tribes and villages that they settled in. Others adopted the practices of those around them, their near neighbors, or they created new ones. I have no idea. And I did a video just recently when someone had made a comment in somebody else's video that said, if you're working with other deities from another pantheon, you're not really a Norse pagan. Point of view, because there is absolutely nothing, none in any of our lore, not in any of our sagas or our Eddas or in the Havamal, that relates to that biblical quotation, "Thou shalt worship no other gods before me." There's nothing. And I said, I'll wait for someone to supply that, because it does not exist. It doesn't. And I find it, yes, incredibly closed-minded for people to crap on esoteric practice. Now, it may not be your jig. You may not be into esoteric practice. You may follow a path that is very Norse-specific. It may be that you venerate just the Asir, or be very strong in your Asatru beliefs. Again, not hating on that in any way, shape, or form. And some people don't give a shit about what the ancient people did, what the ancestors did at the time under the modern worldview and how they practice now. And Paul because of it. But there are others who will openly look at those other influences and practices. And if somebody wants to debate it, there is absolutely historical documentation and chronicles and evidence of two vulvas who traveled, one to Greece and the other to Egypt. Different reasons they both went to those opposite areas in different time frames. Do you think they did not listen to the mystery schools? Do you think they didn't take knowledge or share knowledge and bring that back? Because that role of being that vulva meant them eating, meant them having some level of respect, staying alive and not being unalived by somebody who found them odd or a threat or ominous to them. They were going to use every tool at their disposal to be unique, to be a unique commodity, to be valued, to be wanted, to be called upon by those jarls, by those chieftains. Their survival. It was literally their survival. And I find it incredibly interesting that at times people will say, yeah, no, those things are viewed as not so positive because they're eclectic. Look, if you're, and there is a line, and I'm the first to admit there is absolutely a line. You cannot mix tons of different practices and mishmash them like you've gone to a buffet and say, oh, I'm going to pick this bit, I'm going to pick that bit. I don't like that. I'm going to add this. I'm going to add that. Mishmash it together and think everything's going to agree. Yet, there are some people that do that and they're good. They're whole. And they're happy. Do I have to agree with it? Nope. Does it make my eyeballs itch sometimes? Oh, definitely. But I don't pretend to know the will of the gods and goddesses. I'm a mortal human being. I'm not going to cast that judgment.
Outstanding. Thank you.
My favorite. So why are eclectics looked down upon? Oh, because it's the chicken shit road. It's the search for the constant lowest denominator of a bunch of different things and to mix them all together. It's the bastardization of culture. It's the absolute inability to do any research and study. It's the showing of ignorance for the ability to learn. Like, it's cultural erasure. All of that. In every way, shape, and form. To sit there and look at a culture whose practice and what they were going through is what created these gods and the reasons for these gods existing. It created the stories for how they got there and who they're related to and how they interact with people. And then you go in and go, well, I like this god. Not so much that one, so I'm going to bring one from the Hellenics over here. You have basically just said, yeah, I like that god, but he's not quite good enough. And his family, yeah, fuck them. I'm just going to add this one in over here and do this. You are no longer a Norse pagan at that point. You no longer follow the Norse deities. You follow a mixture. You are now eclectic. And if you want to be eclectic, hey, look, that's your bag, that's your life, that's fine. Me personally, I personally look at it as you're a chicken shit and you're practicing in cultural erasure.
Okay. Christina.
Hi. um, I think anytime we judge anyone about their spiritual practice, it says more about our own emotional trauma and ability to feel as if life is just naturally legitimate for everybody. I don't take a stance in judging what anybody does because who am I to judge another person based upon their own spiritual practice and the calling of their heart. I follow my gods because I follow my gods, but I have been I have helped other people from other spiritual paths. I have worked with people from people from Vedic cultures. I've done readings for these people. I've done ancestral readings from people all around the world, and I don't feel like those gods. I don't worship those gods. I don't consider them ancestral to me, but I consider them friends. And I have met people who span cross-cultural lines with regards to spiritual practices. And I think personally, doing my own work and healing my connection to my ancestors and my ancestral trauma, I realized I don't have a leg to stand on to judge another person with regards to their spiritual path. So I don't see a problem with eclectic. I understand why people do, and I understand where Looney Tunes is coming from. The problem is the soul is super complex, and who are we to know what is right for another person's soul? I don't think I have the right to say that in judgment.
Okay. And then, thank you, Christina. Again, from Kira. Does researching... Can you mute, Ron?
I'm sorry. Yeah, fingernails.
Does researching other cultures erase your love of Norse or Germanic, or say your path? Does that work, Kira? Does researching other cultures detract from the love of what it is you do? And Looney, how do you go first?
Absolutely not. Like I have a master's in theology. I fully encourage everyone to study other people's religions. Only by studying their religion can you truly begin to grasp culture is the way that it is. You know, it's through their religion and their religious practice that you will start to understand why people act a certain way in certain regions and things like that. Plus, when, like, let's say I'm having a dinner and I have a couple of my Muslim friends coming over, by understanding certain facets of their religious practice, I know then what I can or cannot prepare that will be offensive. I can still do it in my own way because it's my house, but I know what I can and can't have on the table. I know, even like differences in the way that the platters and stuff are served, or the difference in greetings, things like that. You always, as a Norse pagan, you always want to be hospitable to a guest. And how are you going to be hospitable to a guest if you don't understand them at all? So I would fully encourage people to go out and study on, other religions, study other paths and walks of life. I also think that by studying them, it's either going to reinforce your commitment to your gods with a fuller and richer understanding, or it's going to drive you into another path. Into another path. Maybe that's where you were meant to be. That's your journey. You're going to have to find it.
Mm-hmm. What I will say is, there's a couple of different paths that you have to study other religions, other spiritualities, other pantheons in order to be able to assist them. For me personally, no, it does not detract from my path at all. It's actually, it's kind of like you should be doing this. So, Christina?
Oh boy, this is such a hot button issue. I'm really hard pressed to because I know that I can answer and I'm going to upset a bunch of people but I'm just going to tell the truth. I work with a lot of Germanic beings, gnomes, elves, dwarves, ancestors, land spirits, and elementals. These elementals live all around the world. And when I moved, wherever I move, I am supported by indigenous land spirits when I set down my roots and set my horger and set my altars down outside. I invariably will have a dream about different and indigenous land spirits. So like here in Colorado, we have beings called Mishapishu, and they're these water panthers that swim in the lakes and the caves and stuff. We also have these cannibal dwarves who are very, and then we have these like little furry yetis. They're part of the Arapaho tribe. I give honor to them because I am a Scythe woman who works with the land here in Colorado. If I did not give honor to them, I would be a terrible colonist Scythe woman, and I would insult the spirits of this land. So I understand I do not live in Germany. I bring my dwarves with me. I have dwarves that live in stone with me from my ancestral homelands, and I have certain items which have ancestral energies in them from my ancestors. And I have to learn how to cohesively mix those with the indigenous cultures of where I live. And for me, it is out of respect to the land. So that's the practical approach. And I have been called eclectic because of this. But the thing is, when I go terribly wrong where I live, I have entities which will attack me because they will see me as an enemy, and I want to live in peace wherever I'm at. So I do teach people that if you work with the land, you definitely need to respect indigenous practices wherever you live. Now, that being said, I also study yoga because I was called to it about 10 years ago due to some health conditions. And I have had amazing results in utilizing some of the practices of yoga and Rune Galder. It has not only healed my body, but has helped me energetically. And I have some very close friends who are rune masters and acupuncturists and also Chinese herbal healers as well. They've been trained in the Orient, they've been trained in energy work and in martial arts, and they have amazing results using sound and energy through using the nadis and the energy points of the body. Is this technically eclectic? Yes. But does it work and heal people? Yes. So ultimately, at the end of the day, I go for what works. I hope that explains everything. So no, it doesn't detract. It actually helps me in my life.
Realm, you are up, madam.
Oh, here it comes. Okay. So, there's a difference between cultural appropriation versus cultural appreciation. And that's cultural, spiritual, and even religious. It goes for all the above. And it's okay that not all of the practices and spiritualities, the things that go along with them, are open to us. We can be okay with that. And we have to respect the indigenous peoples and their practices because they were persecuted, they were erased, they were marginalized. Even to this day, they are. We can respect it, we can appreciate it, but there's a difference between that appreciation versus appropriation in our own practices. And there is a very big difference between spiritual practice and spiritual beliefs, and a lot of people don't think of it that way. There's a huge difference between them. in different spiritualities and understand them. But our actual spiritual practice may be very different. It may be designated to just one form because that is what we were brought up in, that was what we were taught, or that's what we were drawn to. It doesn't mean we can't believe that somebody else's spiritual beliefs and practices and religion don't exist. So they can be, and we can give a nod to, yes, I get it. I get where they're coming from. But again, I'm going to say that between cultural, spiritual, and religious appropriation versus that appreciation at the same time. Huge differences. And again, if you're working, and it depends a lot on path. If you're working on, a certain sort of spiritual path that relates to the northern tradition of shamanism, or as I say, Kona, say Mother, Vitki, Volva, Gothi, understanding those that you work with, assist, that reach out to you for assistance, or that you help, or that you teach, they may come from various different cultural, spiritual, and religious backgrounds. And that knowledge of that helps you to assist them in the way that's best for them, not for the practitioner. It's about the individual. It can't be a self-centered thing. So that understanding, I think, is important. That nod of appreciation towards those practices, cultures, peoples, and spiritualities is a very important thing. And you don't know who's going to come to you for that assistance. It may be someone from any different spirituality or a religious background. You're not helpful to them. You're not assisting to them if you're not able to appreciate and respect where they're coming from. But that doesn't mean it's yours. It doesn't mean you have that right. It doesn't mean you can appropriate. It means you have an understanding, a respect, an appreciation for, in order to do a thing to assist another. And that goes, like Christina said, for the land you inhabit. Because those of us who are living now in the United States, guarantee you there's some indigenous history to the land that you're on. And that respect, that appreciation, that nod to them of not appropriating for that ask, for that ease of existence, coexistence with those ancient spirits is important. They may say, great, yep, thank you. Or they may go, yes, screw you. Ain't your day. And fighting, against that is ridiculous because it was theirs before it was ours.
Thank you, Ron. All right, next question is from Vigilist. Do the gods completely ignore the existence of certain individuals? Seems totally random. Christina, you want to swing first?
Yes, they ignore you. I'm sorry. I just have to say that. I don't know. I don't speak for the gods. I'm sure they have a lot to do. A god can't exist if it's not remembered. That's their limitation. Like if every living being in Midgard forgets the name of a god, it kind of slips into liminal space. So we remember the gods by speaking their stories, saying their names. And so logically, you would think that the gods, their primary concern is staying alive and keeping the people who remember them alive and keeping the people who honor them alive. So, I mean, if you're doing the work of the gods, and this was kind of how I felt like with my spiritual practice and some of the visions that I've had and experiences, that I just do them honor, be kind and loving like Frigga, Be shelter the brokenhearted like Hlyn. Give wisdom like Odin. Support and love like Freyr. Protect women like Freya. Protect your family like Thor. Seek the honorable path like Tyr. We honor the gods by being the best that we can as their representatives. So I think it's really kind of the other way around. It's like, it's not, do the gods forget us? It's like, do we really forget them? Do we get lost in our human lives and forget that we're representatives of them in this world? And I think that's the bigger question.
Okay. Looney, your turn.
Kind of got to back up. I saw you, Eric, with this answer, and yeah, the gods don't give a fuck about you, and why should they? I mean, you have to remember that the gods can only exist in one place at any one point in time. They have specific modes of travel. Freya and her chariot of cats, Thor and his chariot being pulled by the goats, Odin and Sleipnir, so on and so forth. They can only be in one point in one place. They are not omnipotent. They are not omnipotent. They're not omniscient. There are over 4 billion people on the planet. Why should you matter more than anybody else? What makes you stand out to take? Just remember, you're unique, just like everybody else. So
there you go. Realm.
Yep. So this has always been something that comes up. It goes, circles and roundabouts like Groundhog Day. In Norse paganism, especially on social media. If you look at Norse deities, I'm going to agree, they're not omnipresent, they're not omnipotent in any way, shape, or form, and they were also fallible with a lot of human qualities, also anthropomorphic qualities. We can even look at the language in philosophy of religion, theophany, and see, that manifestation, or even hierophany. In the same way, the manifestation of the sacred. How is that manifested? Well, some gods and goddesses were better warriors than others. Some were more skilled than others at certain things, maybe at blessings of the lands or crop or livestock, fertility, people, prosperity, or even magical practice. They were fallible, just like humankind. There's a connection there. And with that, there is nothing that says it. And again, this is a very Abrahamic view that gets translated over into Norse paganism. Why aren't the deities omnipresent? And if I'm doing veneration, if I'm giving an offering, and I'm going to agree with Looney saying, what brought you to their attention or notice with all those that are there? Why did they pick up and go, hey, you little human, you're the one I'm going to tap today? Because in our rational minds, if someone from an Abrahamic, and I'm going to use this as a reference, no hate on anything or anybody, said that, Jesus H. Christ appeared to them in the morning on their toast, in a form on their toast, and then sat down at their breakfast table and had a lot of people go, yeah, nope. But yet there's this wish or hope or thought in a lot of individuals on Norse pagan past that personal interaction and relationship should definitely be a thing. And then they wonder, oh, it's bad, or why isn't it a thing? Well, we look at those links between the gods and the humans. And the link that happens between is through sacrifice. That was a cornerstone of Norse. That sacrifice, giving something that was of value, that was of worth, that gave notice. Now, modernly, we can't do the type of sacrifices that took place back then, but we have different forms in our modern worldview. It's just a fact. We've evolved, we've changed, society has changed. Time can sometimes be seen as that. Those interactions aren't guaranteed. A lot of people are looking to, get something in particular from. You got to ask yourself, okay, is that best for anyone around me? Is it going to alter what would be the natural veer of those around me? Just because I want a thing and I think it's best for me doesn't mean that it's going to have a positive effect on someone else near me, my loved ones, my friends, my closest family. It will have an effect for good or for bad. It will have effect. You're altering something. So there is that close connection and have it feel very valued. To feel valued by beings of cosmological importance. And again, there's a lot of deconstruction in that from Abrahamic faith at why does that have to be a thing? Why do we feel that it has to be a thing? It doesn't mean they don't give a shit about you. It just means, do you come to their attention or notice? The first, and I will always stick to this because, yes, I am that animist, and I'm going to talk about your ancestors. You are flesh of their flesh, blood of their blood, and bone of their bone. Why ain't you talking to them? I'm talking to them first. The deity's got a whole planet full of people. They got their own shit going on in their own realms. Why aren't you looking at those that are attached to you closest? If not that, look at the nature spirits of the tier that are around you, that are closest to you in your physical surroundings. And that's an important part that people forget. They jump from all of that and go straight to, I'm going to have a relationship with this deity. Are you? Why? Why you rather than someone else who may venerate 24 sacrifice something 24/7? What makes anybody more important or to their notice? And again, theology is an important thing, and breaking that down from that Abrahamic deconstruction and looking at the other elements that exist, getting out of our own preconceived notions. Theophany, looking at hierophany, that manifestation of the sacred, the manifestation of a deity. Those are very real studies, and I encourage people to look at those terms, go down those rabbit. Do the gods not care about us? Start looking at those studies and understand where those come into play and where that mindset and that need, that human need, and even psychology and psychiatry, Jung, Freud, where that comes from.
Outstanding. Welcome back, Miss AD. Welcome, late but certainly not forgotten Gums, or Gooms, sorry. We appreciate you being here. We've moved on. We're going through comments, and I've got two as of right now. This one's a good one. This one's from Happily Heathen. As an individual of mixed ethnicity who makes offerings to different cultural deities of her lineage, does that make Happily Heathen eclectic? And I'm going to start right up here at the top. Gums, go ahead. Or Gooms. I keep saying Gums. I'm sorry.
Either way is fine. Good munter, but nobody's about to do that anyways. So what? Let me just get if I get the question. So she's wondering if she's mixed race, that she's somehow a galactic pagan, even though she's venerating Norse gods, or like
yeah. So she's mixed ethnicity, and she makes offerings to different cultural deities of the ethnic lineage. Does that make Happily Heathen eclectic?
In some way, yeah, but in some ways, no. I mean, if she's venerating Norse gods, then she's venerating those. If she's mixing the beliefs, then she becomes a galactic pagan, in my opinion. But as long as she keeps the venerations to the cultural ways that they're done. That's just two different ways of praising, two different views. Like if she's venerating the Norse gods with Norse ways of doing so, she's venerating the other ones with the other cultural heritage, it will be sort of two religions mixed. If she's making one altar, mixing everything on one altar, then I'd say eclectic pagan, yeah. But otherwise, no. If she separates it.
Outstanding. Thank you. AD?
My favorite subjects. Okay. Now, I follow two very, very, very different spiritual paths. Have jack all to do with each other. Okay? They do not mix, match, whatever. I am Norse pagan. I'm a Norse pagan animist. Okay? I'm a shaman. All right? Now, outside of that, what my practices are within that spirituality of Norse paganism, it is strictly Norse paganism. Now, the other flip side of that coin is a whole different spirituality with practices within that spirituality as well. They do not mix. They do not resonate together. I do not blend them. So no, for me, I wouldn't, if as long as you're not, okay, you're not doing, say if you do Reiki, not do runic yoga, you just don't. They do not resonate the same. They do not vibrate the same. They do not have the same energy signatures. They do not mix, okay? That's eclecticism. If you're going to mix spiritualities or spiritual practices, then yes. Say you're going to take Wicca and mix it with Norse paganism. You're eclectic. If you follow them separately, do not mix them at all. You practicing this or you're practicing that. No, you're not blending them. As long as they're not blended and you keep them separate, you're not eclectic. You have different spiritual paths you follow. You separate them. It's when you start blurring the lines between different practices within a spiritual path or say a cultural path. That's when you are that eclectic. So if you have, I'm not going to have my Norse deities on one altar along with Haitian spirits. Okay? I'm not going to do it. I'd be batshit crazy. It just doesn't work for me. But there are some people who do mix certain things, and you know what? You do you, boo boo. That's your spiritual path. That's your cup of tea. Go right ahead. But if you know anything at all about energy, you start blending stuff, start mixing things. Sometimes you're going to muddle the waters. You're going to get lost somewhere in all that, and you're not going to hear, see, or do something that you are trying because they contradict each other.
Thank you. Thank you. Christina?
That's fine. I don't think I'm qualified to answer.
Yes, ma'am. Realm?
You're going to have to repeat that because I just went and checked on kids.
Okay. So the question is, and it's from Happily Heathen. Happily Heathen is an individual of mixed ethnicity who makes offerings to different cultural deities of their lineage. Does that make Happily Heathen eclectic?
Not my opinion, but that's fine. As long as you're, as AD said, not, I did catch that, but not blurring those lines. And I'll give an example of what I think of as eclectic. If you're mixing something like, I don't know, Ptolemaic and Theban with runes in the same formulae to do a thing, or those different practices into one and then making that amalgamation, I would see that as, in my own opinion, eclectic. If you are separating that and doing that work, you know, as AD said, on different spiritual practices or different belief and path systems, I would not personally see that as eclectic at all. If your practice is Norse pagan and you practice Norse paganism and you separate that from something else that you give a nod to and do, whether that comes from your family history or your, you know, because we all have a lot of us, you know, are mutts. We get that relationship. I only recently found out I've got indigenous Americans in my grandmother on my paternal side, her and all of her family. No clue. Never mixed that practice into my Nordic practice whatsoever. Am I going to explore it? You betcha I am. Would I view that as eclectic? No, because I separate the two. Neither one has anything to do with the other. But that's a personal decision for each individual. And again, if someone calls you eclectic, does it change the way you practice or believe? Relationship with the deities that you work with? That's a you decision. People can put labels on all sorts of stuff, but does that alter what you are going to believe and devote time to and energy into? You have to decide for yourself. Does someone else define you? Again, that's up to, as far as I'm concerned, that's each individual. But that's just me. That's personal, and that's just me. I ain't speaking for nobody else. That's all I got to say.
Lieutenant Diane. Looney.
So I have a slightly unique view on that, and I don't believe it makes them eclectic at all. As long as you can keep, those things separate, you do you, boo boo. But when it comes to ancestral veneration and doing that stuff, that's where I have kind of a caveat, because if you were trying to reach out to a specific ancestor, okay, picture it as though you're going camping. You're supposed to meet up with some of your buddies here, but they're in a different spot and you don't know exactly where it is. Well, as you're wandering through, you see other campers. You're not going to go up to their campsites and ask if that's your buddies, because there's certain key components that you recognize from your buddy's camp that will show you which one it is. The same thing applies when you're trying to reach out to an ancestor. Why would I practice, an outside spiritual setup for calling out to an ancestor that they're not going to recognize in the first fucking place? There's going to be no reason for them to come towards me because, well, whatever's going on over there. Much of my family on my mom's side is Slavic, so the ancestors that I reach out to there, I use a very Slavic practice because I know that they're going to recognize it. I don't mix any of my Norse, beliefs or anything into it because, well, honestly, they're not going to fucking recognize it anyway. So, in stuff like that, no, you're doing what you need to do to reach out to and honor who you want to, and you're keeping it separate from your personal faith. That's not eclectic. Now, if I were to try to use with Norse practices to reach out to them, then that would be, because you're mixing cultures together like that. So no, I mean, you do what you got to do.
All right. Angelique would like to know, what problematic writer should I stay away from that writes Norse pagan books? Gooms.
If you can get some of the video just in PDF, just read it with a grain of salt. I don't really just know that that's their views, that's what they're trying to push. But otherwise, read as much material as you can get your hands on. Just be aware of what you're reading. I would say try to get PDFs to avoid supporting them, but read it. Every type of knowledge is good knowledge. It's just when you know what they're trying to push is harmful, then just keep that very far in the front of your mind while you're reading it, because there might be some sort of view that you hadn't thought of while you're reading it. Otherwise, just stick to the Eddas and sagas, and Icelandic sagas have a lot of knowledge in them and a lot of cultural stuff in it as well. So just read. There's a lot of, just take it all.
Thank you, Gooms. AD?
He said it. I'm I'm a book nerd. I just, knowledge is knowledge. The discernment comes in of how you're going to get said knowledge. And take some things with a grain of salt. Yes, there are some particular problematic problematic organizations that are funded through publications that have their own publishing house that, you know, will fund their organizations. That's a problem. However, he said it. I mean, I have damn near 10 terabytes full of PDF files, and there's some information out there in books. You know, the problematic book has some really damn good information. This is where that comma comes in. When it comes to someone's UPG and the way they present something, just be very aware of what you're reading. Use that discernment. Be wise of knowing, hey, we know this is a problematic organization. We know this is funded through purchase of books, but no knowledge is bad knowledge, because even if you're reading one of those problematic authors that people like to label and throw out there, which, yeah, there are some, problematic organization with problematic belief systems, but yet the information is not wrong in some aspects. It's their view and how they practice it. That's the problem. But again, it's that discernment, learning to understand what you're reading. I'm not going to hand a certain book to someone who's new on their path and go, here, start with this. No, I'm going to stand with 3 books and go, here, some version of the prose edda, poetic edda, or even, you know, and then throw in the Havamal. So go with those. After that, when you are understanding what you're reading and how, and the problems in our circles that we see, when you're a little more further, you'll start recognizing the language. You'll start understanding, okay, these are the red flags, these are the dog whistles, these are the problematic individuals. But when it comes to the written word, knowledge is not, even if it's problematic from a problematic source, use that discernment.
You keep on saying that word. No, I'm kidding.
I swear I'm gonna tattoo that word somewhere. Discernment.
Christina.
So I just want to say legally, I cannot label names here because it could actually come under defamation. I will say is very much like what Gooms said, read as much as you can. But if you are concerned about who you're supporting, go online and research the lives of those authors. Ask questions, go on blogs, ask about who these people are, what they stand for, how they act in the community, and specifically look at how they treat women and children. And if you start digging, you will find there is a correlation between those arenas of dog whistles and how women and children are treated in those communities. So just, just do your research. And there are tons of PDF free stuff online. And but as always, start with Eddas and sagas. Those are the traditional stories. There's also there's so many fairy tales from all of the different Germanic tribes. There are Finnish fairy tales, there's Norwegian, there's Swedish, there's Germanic, there's Belgium, there's Russian, there's Slavic, there's Lithuanian, like you name it. There's Baltic. There are so many different fairy tales. Fairy tales will tell you a lot of the beliefs of the common working class people. Most of the Eddas were written in the perspective of those who were landholders, jarls, and leaders. And they were often, there was a lot of intrigue, there's a lot of drama. They weren't doing a lot of the farming and the nitty-gritty stuff. But fairy tales were written by the common folk, the people who were actually doing the hard work with the land. So you can learn a lot from those.
Thank you, Christina. Realm?
Okay. So I did a video on my profile a while back to educate some people on certain authors and the perspectives from which they come from, whether that be AFA. And I'm not telling anybody, I never told and I never will tell somebody what you can and cannot study, learn, read, research, take with a pinch of salt, or what you choose to do on your path. It ain't about that. But, however, saying that, personally, for myself, and there are a lot of people out there that would like to know where the information from some of these authors comes from, what lens and perspective that they're inserting upon what it is they put for wider consumption. You got to ask yourself, do you want information that comes from an objective lens, or do you want it to come from somebody who's using a gnosis or their own personal practice and blending it with Norse paganism from the lens of the Temple of Set, the Order of the Shining Trapezohedron, the Satanic Church? What is it that you're willing to use, or what are you going to consume and read just to know what's knowledge? And there's a difference between that, and not a lot of people know those, especially new to the path, know those differences. And that's why I did that video to explain where some of these, and some very popular and very well-known authors come from, without mentioning names so I don't end up in legal issues. And it's important that we know where that comes from, so that we do have that. Not everybody knows this. And you do have to look at it from, okay, I get what they're saying. However, maybe you don't want the Temple of Set mixed with your Norse paganism, because that wasn't a thing. Maybe you don't want the Order of the Shining Trapezohedron mixed with your Norse pagan practice, because that wasn't a thing. Maybe you do. You have to make that decision for yourself, but having that understanding where it comes from. And publishing companies, that's a big real for quite a long period of time, our major publishing companies, not as horribly in Europe as it was in the US, did not want to touch anything that they considered occultism, Norse paganism or otherwise. They didn't want to touch it. So some of these authors who had these viewpoints coming from inserted that Temple of Set or the Order of the Shining Trapezohedron or even the Satanic Church, brought this in by creating and developing their own publishing company, when there was nothing else that was putting out this other, including theirs, occult writings. But they controlled the narrative then. They controlled the content and what was fed to the general public. And they did that for quite some time. Especially promoting their own ideologies and their own works. And not a lot of people know about that. And those authors that owned, one in particular, I'm not going to say names, that owned a particular publishing company that used it absolutely for their own personal gnosis based on those other practices, blended with Norse paganism and even with runology. Knowledge is power. Ignorance leaves us open, and we always seek. But I'd say look for those individuals and do research on them. Research the author. Research where their background comes from. What point of view and perspective and lens are they putting on their writing? Is it objective? Does it come from an influence from somewhere else that may align with or may not align with your personal morals, ethics, and beliefs?
Thank you, Realm. Luna, you're up.
I'm gonna fully agree with what Christina and the other panelists have had to say. Just research who you're writing. Otherwise, if you want like a good comprehensive list of the people that you're reading and what they're about, Kira has a link in her bio. Go check that out. She needs a merch link in there, so I can throw that out there too. But otherwise, yeah, just research what you're reading. Personally, I mean, I from the 1800s, which is during that whole period of when people were skin tonally focused and stuff, all the way up through the 40s. I have newer stuff. I have new translations of stuff. Like, read everything. You're gonna find what you want to find. You just have to know how to have discernment and how to use a little bit of critical thinking to recognize what you're reading and what to filter out and what not to filter out. And that's all.
Okay. One question, unless somebody puts a really, really good one in the comments, and then we'll wrap things up. Ev Masket asks, is there more that I can do as a Norse pagan, such as becoming a healer or something to that effect? Gums.
Not really. Just be yourself. I mean, that's the most important part. I I don't do any of the magical stuff. I stick to being true to myself and my ancestry. I venerate my ancestors by raising the next generation. I venerate the earth by planting seeds, crops, and everything, and she gives me in return to feed my family. I mean, it's about finding which part of the belief speaks to you. It's not about you trying to find what you need to do for it. It's how you can use this to better yourself. Be yourself. Just very basic. That's basically how the Nordic cultures have evolved. Very much about being true to yourself before you become true to anything else. So,
Oh. AD?
Nowhere does it say you have to do more. Nowhere. And just because you read a thing doesn't mean you have to do a thing. My work with herbology, my work with, my PhD in psychiatry, things that I do, my shaman work, does that make me a better Norse pagan? No, because it's part of who I am and what I am. You can choose this or that. It's things that I've learned because, one, I'm damn good at what I do, and I enjoy it. It's peaceful for me. But be true, exactly. Be true to yourself. It's your path. If you want to be a healer, be a healer. If you want to pick up if you have that talent and you are able to, it's like kind of like riding a bike. You enjoy riding a bike. You first you're scared to death of the bike. You don't like the bike because you're going to skin your knee, bust your toe. But once you get comfortable riding the bike, you know what? Okay. So then after that, guess what? If you don't continue to ride the bike and you stop it as a kid, teenager, and then try to do it in your 40s, guess what? You're going to bust your ass all over again. Certain skills you have to hone into. You may be born with a talent. You may be born with like an affinity for something. If that's it, that's part of you. That's part of who you are. Build on that. Grow it. Cultivate it. But is it necessary? Absolutely not. Your spirituality is more than academics, okay? Your spirituality is what is your connection to your path. Be it something triggered it, something brought it to you, you were born in it. Build that connection. And if you want to be a healer, deity for you in the Norse pagan, Ir. That one right there. And then, and if you're a female, I'm just going to use this example. And if you're a mother and you're a healer, those are two deities that you can work beautifully together. It's your choice. It doesn't make you any better of a Norse pagan or less than. Your connection to your spirituality is uniquely yours. There's no wrong way nor right way. It's your way. And that's all there is to it.
Thank you. Christina?
I would argue that, like, anyone who wants to help their fellow man is technically a healer. Anyone who reaches out a hand in frith to help their fellow human being and to give kindness where in a world that is cutthroat and brutal, yeah, of course, you are a healer. And you don't have to do anything extra. Being makes you de facto healer. As to skills and gifts, I think that those naturally come through the spiritual practice. I've found that, all the people that I've walked through runic classes and Saith classes, I have found that everybody has their innate gifts and they are uncovered in their process of discovering themselves. So it is a process of self-discovery. And if you want to help people in certain capacity, do so. But you're really not under obligation to help anybody. I've met many heathens who are incredibly talented and gifted, and they help no one but themselves. And that's fine. We are allowed that. But I think we're all healers at our heart. We're all humans here helping each other out.
Very good. Realm?
So I'm gonna, some said, just hit so well. Raising the next generation, that nurturing, that bringing forth and developing and nurturing. That's so underrated, so underappreciated, so undervalued, even by it's hard sometimes. Sometimes it's unforgiving. Sometimes we fail. Sometimes we lose ground. Sometimes we gain ground. But that nurturing and that raising of the next generation absolutely is the foundation for which the people's progressed. Otherwise, we wouldn't exist. And that healing of yourself first is an important thing before you look out to heal anything or anybody else. Healing yourself. Because if we're not whole, how are we supposed to make something or someone else whole? If our cup is empty, how are we supposed to fill another? Eventually, we falter, and then we're of use to no one. If you're looking to go down, the various different parts of healing, ask questions. Seek someone who's an ethical teacher who practices whatever it is that you seek or that you're drawn to. Whether that be via herbology, whether that be via shamanism, whether that be via, other elements. You seek what it is that speaks to you and what you're drawn to, and vetting those teachers to see that they're ethical and they meet with what it is your objectives are you're looking for. And I'll also agree, listen to your soul. Listen to your true self. What it is that you feel that your calling is. And I'll agree with AD and everyone else. There's no such thing as more. We are who we are. There is no requirement to do more. It's not written anywhere. You should do more. It's not anywhere. And there's many different ways to heal that are out there, not just on that shamanic level, but how many times people hand some money over or buy groceries for someone in line in front of you who can't afford it, or bring food out to a homeless or hungry individual? How many times do we help a family member, a friend, or a child through a physical, mental, or daily struggle? Those things are a form of healing. And it's not limited to just people that are living here or around us, or people in general. Nature, passion. Those things are methods of healing as well.
Outstanding. Thank you. Looney?
Well, it quite clearly states throughout the lore what you're expected to do. I mean, what was Odin the most afraid of losing? His memories that he had created with other people. What does it tell you in the Havamal about, having a reputation, that's worthy of being remembered? One of the lore is, is anybody even gonna remember you around a fire? Go out there and be worthy of creating memories. Be worthy of being talked about. Leave a fucking legacy behind that, people want to talk about. That's the greatest thing that you can achieve in Norse paganism, in my opinion, and from what I've read in the lore. Don't be a piece of shit and go out there and fucking live it. That's all there is to it.
Caveat question. Is being a piece of shit subjective? No, I'm just kidding. All right. This is for
You could be Swedish.
Booms. What's that?
I said, well, technically, like as the Nordic countries, you could be Swedish because all the Swedes are to them is a shopping mall. So
This next question, it's the one that we started off with. It's two parts. So Gooms and AD, if you would like to answer it, I know there's some people clamoring in the comments for you two to answer it. So if you are ready, the question is, what are the similarities in Norse pagan practices by those from Nordic countries and those in the U.S.?
Well, similarities are, of course, the gods, but when it comes to the practices in itself, there's going to be areas that do it the same way as the Americans, and there's going to be Americans that do it the same way as the Nordics. It's all about personal practice, in a sense. The I think one of the, like when it comes to those is here it's more of a natural thing. If even though you've been raised Christian and all that stuff, and you're having a hard time, you'll see that people will speak to these gods as well as the Christian version of it because it's just ingrained in them that they exist. They don't necessarily need to be Norse pagan if they're just having a really, really hard time and they, hear, okay, Thor would fit very well in this situation. I mean, Iceland, for example, is Lutheran Christian, so everybody has a confirmation when they're 14. I was undergoing my training when I was 14 during this time to get my confirmation done. And there was this massive storm outside. My the main priest in the area, and he goes, "Shit, Thor's mad today." I mean, it's just such an ingrained thing in our culture that it's just such an automatic thing. And I think that's, in a sense, the main nuance between the two. I'm not saying that, people that moved to America from the Nordic countries a few generation or one generation ago didn't bring parts of these cultures with them. But there is always going to be a massive difference between, like, our education system teaches us all about these things because we need to learn the old ways of writing to know the modern ones. So we are more ice for the most part because that's nature was harsh and there was thunderstorms all the time. So that's what my ancestors were venerating for the most part. So they chose what would fit for their best way of doing things, what would help them the best by venerating. So yeah, it's very similar to the magical aspect of it is a little bit less used here. Otherwise, it's mostly folk tales and such things that go into the practices, because we have a lot of those that both don't translate well and simply haven't properly been translated over. So I think there's parts missing for the other side of the Atlantic. She lives 40 minutes away from me and she's sharing these on TikTok all the time, and I'm still learning about the Norwegian ones because I am of the island. I live in the Norwegian area now. So yeah, I think that's like gonna be one of the main differences is that we have a little bit easier access to the folklore and the tales to help us when it comes to our practices.
Appreciate that. AD?
What a good question. All right. Now, I've never lived in any of the Nordic countries. I'm from Scotland. My grandparents, however, were, and they brought those traditions they were raised with into Scotland. So we had the stories and the tales that they did in our home because that's what we said. You know, I can remember being a little one and after dinner sitting at the hearth on a cold freaking night or even a sweltering summer night with all the damn windows open, just wishing and praying for a damn breeze because it was so bleeding hot. But those were our stories. That's what our entertainment was in some respects. And then the way they talked about the deities, at first for us, they were all stories until you started comprehending, wait a minute, they're not just stories, hold on. And then I know you've heard me say it, a lot of you have heard me say it, that is, what until you were old enough and you got your first book, read the book. Are you able to comprehend what you're reading? That's becomes the education for us was, this is the old way. This is what we believe. This is why we would believe it. So the education was very different. And for me, leaving that and that, what I call safe zone for me, and then coming into North America, what I find different, and this is in my personal experience, is a lot of people focus more on the academia in North America, really, truly the academia, versus what was that connection that brought you in first? Where is that spiritual connection versus, yeah, I can read a book, I can comprehend a book all day long. Where's my connection to it? That's what I found. That's why I've seen so many who come into this and then within 1 or 2 years leave, because it's one book after the next, after the next, after the next, and they don't have that spiritual connection. I've had that spiritual connection all my life, which wanted me to read more, know more, get, to the lore, the academic studies, the archaeology, the migration studies, the sagas, the folklore, and seeking those books, going into Nordic countries and coming home with a half a truckload worth of books because that's the only place to get my damn hands on them.
Yeah.
But for me, in my experience, I think the biggest difference is a spiritual connection first.
Thank you, AD. So for Gums and AD, the second part of that question is, where do Germanic Norse practices / heathenry and animism fit into that equation? Gooms, please go ahead.
I think like my third and a half language animism is. What's the definition of animism?
Realm, do you want to answer that question? What an animist is?
Yeah, so animism is the belief and understanding that all things contain energy, frequency, vibration, and spirit, whether that be seen or unseen populations, everything from rocks to earth to grass to animals, and viewing it all as part of the greater whole, the matrix of all things, all interconnected, interwoven, and codependent and interdependent upon one another.
I mean, if you guys would look at a map of Reykjavik, you'll see that we have a lot of roundabouts, and that's not because we need a lot of roundabouts. The Huldufolk, they have something called Huldukirkja, which is a Huldu church or a veneration place. And every time we try to move these rocks, they break the machines. So be it a D11 or whatever, the machine won't do anything, and there's not a scratch on the rock. Don't mess with them, be they a believer or not. They'll just leave that thing alone because we don't take the chances. There's literally, the hidden folk. We don't take the chance. So even how religious or non-religious you are, you'll just leave it alone.
I think you guys just like driving around in circles.
Yeah, so we thought it was because when they were constructing the areas, they just left their coffee mugs on all the time, so it made like the coffee rings. So, but no, it's because they couldn't remove the rocks. And then you have this is actually from my family. My great grandmother She lost her brother. She was being haunted by her brother. She, because he died at a young age and he was afraid to be forgotten, like the Havamal says, do something of value that makes you, you know, everybody will pass, but great men who do great things will be remembered. But he kept haunting her. So my grandfather's name became on his past, so I can say it, Guðmundur Bjarni Baldursson. But that wasn't enough because her brother's name was Guðmundur Bjarnason Baldursson. So his younger brother was named that. So they have the same name and they're brothers, but they only lacked the son in the middle name. And when she passed, I think just within the year, my dad's cousin was born, and she also ancestors. She keeps getting haunted by them until, like, or sees them. Sometimes she says it's a gift, sometimes she says it's a plague, and the which I was always skeptical of this. I've always been skeptical of all religions, and I've, after losing my son, I felt that Norse paganism pulled me further in. It's always been a part of my life, but it dragged me in after my son passed. So when I got married, my dad's cousin was there because she also lives in Norway, and she did not know that me and my grandfather, before he passed, we were like thick as thieves. We were just, we lived in the same small fishing village. I went to him every day after school because mom was at work, and he just looked at me. And when I came outside, the ceremony, and I gave her a hug, and she just whispered in my ear, "Your grandfather was standing next to you," and he was so proud, and I just broke. That's when I knew, okay, she really sees it, because I was always skeptical of this. But yeah, so for me, the animism, the spiritual path or spiritual part of this, is a very real part. It's broken me a few times.
Oh, we lost AD. We don't get to ask her the second portion. Maybe she'll come back real quick. I don't know.
So yeah, it's like a personal thing on the animism. So
no, thank you very much. I know some of that's
uh,
not easy to talk about. So I mean, I'm sure everyone appreciates your aspect and your perspective on things.
if you're gonna share how you view things, you have to share what you go through sometimes. So there needs to be a reason behind the views. And also, while we're waiting for AD to build on the other part, the first part of the first question, one thing that is also very different between America and English, or the Nordic way of doing things, is we don't need to search for translated material, like heavily translated over to a different group of wordage, if you know what are very much different from English. That's why putting a Nordic language into Google Translate will always give you a mumbled up sentence, or in many cases a mumbled up sentence in English. That's the one thing that makes, leads the differences between the two. I'm happy to share.
Thank you, Gums. I want to say thank you to all of the panelists, and thank you to my very special moderators that I had for this evening, Norse Jedi and Redline. They've been on it all night. Thank you to everybody in the comments for asking questions and being respectful for the most part. There's a couple that had to be taken out. But we're past 21K likes. I mean, it was a great live, a lot of perspective, and it was for the community. Not only do I appreciate that, I'm sure everybody in the comments and even people that were voyeuring on the FYP also appreciate it. So I want to thank each and every one of you for being here, everyone in the comments, and helping me put this on. And I greatly appreciate all of you. Thank you very much.
Thanks for having me. I was late. It's like 3:30 a.m. here now. So
Anytime.
Absolutely.
They're confused with the time.
It was nice to be on the other side of the panel this time. I get to ask you all the questions. Oh,
Thank you, Nasty. It was wonderful.
you're very welcome. It was
Thanks.
wonderful having everyone.
Really was. Awesome. Thank you so much.
With that, I have to be to work. Gums has to start the coffee pot. So, thank you everybody for. It was a pleasure. Thank you.